Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at how we can apply the ideas from Make Time by Jake Knapp and John Zeratsky
Oh, great choice.
to the world of school leadership.
Nice.
So, that feeling of being constantly busy, always on the go, I think it's something that a lot of school leaders can relate to. And this book really dives into why modern life feels that way.
It does. It really captures that sense of overwhelm that's so pervasive these days. And the authors make a compelling case for how technology plays a huge role in all of that.
Yeah, they use that metaphor of infinity pools to describe things like, social media, email, all those things that can just suck us in.
Oh, that's such a good analogy, infinity pools. It's so easy to just get lost in them, spending hours on things that don't really move the needle in the grand scheme of things.
It really is. And that's why I think this book, Make Time, has so much to offer to school leaders. Think about it. You're dealing with new ed tech, emails from parents, staff meetings, the list goes on and on.
It's like a never-ending cycle of demands.
It is. It's like you're constantly surrounded by these infinity pools, all vying for your attention.
And I think what's really fascinating is how the book points out that our brains, they haven't really evolved to keep up with the pace of technology. It's not that we're bad at multitasking, it's that our brains simply aren't wired for this kind of constant stimulation and distraction.
Right. And that's where the Make Time framework comes in, right?
Yeah.
It's not about becoming a Luddite and throwing away your smartphone. It's about using technology more intentionally.
That's the key, intentionality. And I think for school leaders, that could be a real game changer. Imagine being able to harness the power of technology while still protecting your time and energy so you can focus on what truly matters.
Right, on the things that are going to make a real difference.
And I think that's what the Make Time framework helps us do. It's about making conscious choices about how we spend our time, rather than just letting ourselves get swept up in the busy bandwagon, as they call it.
Yeah, the busy bandwagon. The book actually shares this anecdote about John Zeratsky, one of the authors, losing like 2 whole months to the daily grind.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he just realized he couldn't remember anything particularly memorable from that time because he was so caught up in just, getting through each day.
It's like you're on autopilot, just going through the motions.
Exactly. And I think it's so easy to fall into that trap, especially when you're in a leadership position. There's always something that needs your attention, always a fire to put out. Have you ever felt like that, listener? Like you're just going through the motions, losing sight of the bigger picture?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's something that a lot of school leaders can relate to. When you're juggling so many responsibilities, it's easy to get caught up in just reacting to what's in front of you. But if we're constantly reacting, when do we find the time to actually lead? To focus on the school's vision, on developing our staff, on creating a truly impactful learning environment for our students?
That's such a good point. And that's why I think this book is so valuable. It gives us a framework for breaking free from that reactive cycle and becoming more intentional with our time and energy.
It does, and it starts with choosing a daily highlight. The one thing you want to prioritize above all else each day.
I've heard some people say, isn't that just another to-do list item?
Yeah.
But I think the highlight is different.
It is different. It's not about adding more to your plate. It's about being really deliberate about how you use your time.
It's about saying, okay, this is the one thing I really want to accomplish today.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be something monumental.
Absolutely not. It could be connecting with a student who's been struggling. It could be spending some time working on your school's strategic plan. It could even be just having a really focused conversation with a teacher. It's about aligning your actions with what matters most to you as a school leader.
I love that. It's about being clear about your priorities. But okay, here's the thing that I'm sure is on everyone's mind right now. How do we actually make time for this highlight? It's not like our calendars are going to magically clear themselves,
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. But luckily, the book doesn't just leave us hanging. It gives us a whole bunch of really creative tactics for actually making time for what matters. And I think a lot of them can be especially helpful in a school setting.
Oh, that's good. So what are some of the tactics that you think would be particularly useful for school leaders?
Well, one that comes to mind is called groundhog it. It's this idea of, if you have a really successful day, like you feel incredibly productive, could you try to replicate that schedule, or at least parts of it, on other days? Like imagine you have a day where you got some strategic planning done, you connected with your staff, you even had time to visit a few classrooms. Could you groundhog it and try to build those activities into your schedule more regularly?
Interesting. So it's almost like you're taking the guesswork out of scheduling.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, okay, this worked well, let's do more of this.
Exactly. You're building in those non-negotiable blocks of time for your highlight, those things that are really going to make a difference.
I like that. So what are some other tactics that you think would be particularly helpful?
Um, Another one that I really like is called batch the little stuff. You know how administrative tasks can just eat up your whole day if you let them?
Oh, absolutely. It's like death by a thousand paper cuts.
It is. So the idea here is to group similar tasks together and just get them all done at once. So instead of responding to emails throughout the day, maybe you set aside a specific time block each day for email and just power through it all then. Or maybe you block out an hour on Friday afternoon to deal with all those little administrative things that have piled up during the week.
So you're creating those dedicated chunks of time, those power hours, where you can just focus on one type of task.
Right. And by batching those activities, you're freeing up bigger blocks of time for your highlight, for the work that requires more focus and deep thinking.
It's about reclaiming control over your schedule rather than letting it control you.
Right. Exactly. And there's this other tactic called the burner list,
Okay, a burner list.
which I think could be really helpful for anyone who's constantly bombarded with requests and ideas, which I think is pretty much every school leader out there.
Yeah, for sure.
So have you ever had that experience where you're trying to focus on something important, but then a random thought pops into your head like, oh, I need to order more art supplies, or I should follow up with that parent about their concern?
Oh my gosh, all the time. It's like my brain is a never-ending to-do list.
I know, right? It's so distracting. Well, the burner list is basically a place to capture those fleeting thoughts. So instead of letting them take up space in your working memory, you just jot them down on a list and get them out of your head. And that frees up mental space so you can be more present in the moment, whether you're interacting with a student, having a meeting with a teacher, or working on that strategic plan.
I love that. It's like you're decluttering your mind
Exactly.
so you can focus on what's truly important.
That's the goal. And I think all of these tactics, even though they might seem small on their own, they can really add up to a big shift in how we approach our work as school leaders.
It's about making those small, consistent changes that can have a huge impact over time.
Right. Right. But let's be real. Distractions aren't just going to magically disappear, especially in a school environment.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
In fact, I think distractions are probably one of the biggest challenges that school leaders face. It's a constant battle to protect your time and attention.
It is. And that's what the second step of the Make Time framework addresses, laser focus. It's all about recognizing that we can't eliminate distractions, but we can redesign our relationship with them.
Okay, redesign our relationship with distractions. So how do we do that? How do we create that laser focus when we're surrounded by so many demands on our time and attention?
Well, the book offers some pretty radical suggestions. Some of them might seem a bit extreme, especially for a school leader.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
But I think even if we can't implement them literally, there are some really valuable underlying principles we can take away. So one of the most impactful tactics is what they call a distraction-free phone.
Okay, I'll be honest, when I first read that,
Right.
I thought, yeah, right. Like, I'm going to give up my smartphone. I mean, it's how I stay connected to the school, to parents, to everything.
I know, right? It does seem a bit drastic. And the book acknowledges that it's not going to be realistic for everyone. But I think the core idea here is to be more intentional about which apps we use and when we use them. Like instead of constantly checking email or scrolling through social media, what if you set aside specific times for those activities? Maybe you have a separate device for school-related communication that you only check during certain hours. Or maybe you just take those tempting social media apps off your phone altogether.
So it's about setting some boundaries, creating some space between ourselves and those digital distractions.
Exactly. And another big one that the book emphasizes is to ignore the news. And I know staying informed is super important, especially for school leaders. But the book argues that this constant barrage of news, it can actually be detrimental to our focus and well-being. It can get us caught up in a cycle of negativity and anxiety.
It's like you're constantly being bombarded with information, but not all of it is helpful or necessary.
Exactly, and it can be really draining. So the book suggests limiting news consumption to maybe once a week and choosing sources that provide a balanced and in-depth perspective rather than just constantly checking headlines and social media updates.
That's a good point. It's about being selective about where we get our information from
It is.
and not letting the news cycle dictate our mood or our energy level.
Absolutely. And the book takes this idea even further with the suggestion to turn distractions into tools. Instead of letting technology control us, we get to decide how and when we will use it. Like we're in the driver's seat.
I like that idea. So could you give me an example of what that might look like for a school leader?
Sure, let's say you use social media to connect with the school community. Instead of letting it become this, infinity pool that sucks up all your time, you could set some specific boundaries around it. Like maybe you dedicate 30 minutes on Tuesday and Thursday mornings to engage with your school's social media accounts, responding to comments and sharing updates, and then you log off and move on to other things. You're using social media as a tool to achieve a specific goal rather than letting it control your attention.
I love that. So it's not about avoiding technology altogether. It's about being strategic with how we use it.
It is. It's about being intentional and setting boundaries.
Okay, so we've talked about choosing a highlight, using laser focus to protect our time and attention. What's the next step in the make time framework? What else can we do to, you know, create more time for what matters?
Well, the third step is all about energize, focusing on the things that fuel our brains and bodies. And I think this is especially important for school leaders who are often working incredibly long hours and dealing with a lot of stress.
I mean, it's a demanding job, right? There's always something going on.
It is. And the book points out that our modern lifestyle, it often depletes our energy. We're sitting for long periods, we're eating processed foods, we're not getting enough sleep, and we're constantly plugged in.
It's like we're running on fumes.
Exactly. So the Energize principle is all about finding ways to recharge our batteries, to take care of ourselves so that we can show up as our best selves.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we energize ourselves when we're already feeling exhausted and overwhelmed?
Well, the book suggests some really simple but powerful strategies. One of them is exercise every day, but don't be a hero. And it's not about doing these grueling workouts or training for a marathon. It's about finding small, sustainable ways to move your body throughout the day.
And I think that word sustainable is key.
Yeah.
As a school leader, you're already juggling so much. You don't need to add another big thing to your to-do list, right?
Right. So instead of thinking about carving out an hour for the gym, think about how you can build movement into your existing routine. Like, could you stand up while you're on the phone? Could you take walking meetings with colleagues? Could you encourage your staff to take the stairs instead of the elevator?
I love the idea of walking meetings. It's a way to get exercise, fresh air, a change of scenery, all while getting work done. And it could be a fun way to connect with staff and build relationships.
It could be. And the book also suggests inconveniencing yourself to create more opportunities for movement.
Wait, inconveniencing yourself. That doesn't sound very fun.
I know, right? It sounds a little counterintuitive. But the idea here is to challenge our default settings. Like instead of always choosing the easiest or most convenient option, we look for ways to incorporate more movement into our daily tasks. So maybe you park further away from the school entrance, so you have to walk a little bit more. Maybe you take the stairs instead of the elevator, even if it's just 1 or 2 flights. Maybe you carry your groceries instead of using a shopping cart.
So it's about being more mindful of our choices and finding those little opportunities to move our bodies throughout the day. Like we're sneaking in mini workouts.
Exactly. And those little moments, they can really add up over time. And speaking of mini workouts, the book also advocates for super short workouts. The idea is that even just a few minutes of intense exercise can have significant benefits for our energy levels and our overall health.
So we're talking about finding those bursts of activity throughout the day rather than feeling like you have to go to the gym for an hour.
Exactly. Like maybe you do some jumping jacks in your office between meetings, or you take a 5-minute break to do some push-ups and squats. It's about fitting in movement whenever and wherever you can.
It's about reframing exercise as something that's accessible and achievable, even for the busiest school leader.
It is. It's about changing our mindset.
Okay, I'm liking this. So we've talked about movement. What else can we do to energize ourselves?
Well, another important piece of the Energize principle is finding your last call for caffeine.
Last call, like at a bar.
Exactly. It's that idea of there's a cutoff time for caffeine consumption, and everyone is different, but for most people, consuming caffeine too close to bedtime can really interfere with sleep. So it's about being mindful of how caffeine affects your body and finding what works for you.
Right, so maybe you have your last cup of coffee at 2 in the afternoon, or you switch to decaf after dinner.
It's about being intentional with your caffeine intake, using it as a tool to boost your energy and focus rather than letting it disrupt your sleep.
That makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about movement, we've talked about caffeine. What else can school leaders do to energize themselves?
Well, the book also talks a lot about the importance of real food, eating whole, unprocessed foods that give us sustained energy and nourish our bodies. It's about ditching the processed stuff and focusing on foods that are going to make us feel good.
And I think this is a really important message for school leaders because you're not just taking care of yourself, you're also in a position to influence the food culture of your entire school community.
You are. School leaders can model healthy eating habits, advocate for nutritious options in the cafeteria, and even incorporate nutrition education into the curriculum.
It's about creating a school environment that supports the well-being of both students and staff.
Exactly. And when everyone is well nourished and energized, they're better able to learn, grow, and thrive.
That's a beautiful vision.
Mm.
So we've talked about movement, caffeine, real food as ways to boost our energy. What's the last piece of the Energize puzzle?
Well, the final piece, and perhaps the most crucial, is sleep. The book makes a really strong case for the power of sleep, not just for physical health, but for our cognitive function, our emotional well-being, and our overall energy levels.
Right, true. We tend to wear sleep deprivation like a badge of honor,
Uh,
you know, like it's proof of how hard we're working.
I know. It's like a weird point of pride. But the reality is, we're doing ourselves a disservice when we don't get enough sleep.
We're not running at our full potential.
We're not. And the book reminds us that sleep isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's essential for our ability to function at our best, both personally and professionally.
So how do we prioritize sleep when we have so many other demands on our time? Like, how do we actually make time for sleep when we feel like we don't have enough time for anything?
Well, the book offers some really practical advice for creating a sleep-conducive environment. They call it sleeping in a cave.
Sleeping in a cave. That sounds a little intense.
It's a metaphor, of course,
Okay.
when it really captures the idea of creating a space that is dark, quiet, and cool, a sanctuary for rest and rejuvenation, like a space that's dedicated to sleep.
So it's about setting the stage for good sleep. What are some specific things that school leaders can do to create that cave environment?
Well, one of the most important things is to make your bedroom a bedroom, and that means removing distractions, especially screens.
So no more late night emails or scrolling through social media in bed.
I know, it's hard, but that blue light emitted from screens, it can really interfere with our sleep cycles. So it's about creating a clear boundary between work time and rest time. Your bedroom should be a place for sleep, not for work.
It's about creating a space where you can truly unwind and disconnect from the demands of the day.
It is.
And I think that's so important, especially for school leaders who are often tempted to work late into the night.
I agree.
It's about recognizing that rest is just as important as work. And you can't pour from an empty cup, as they say.
You can't. And another tip the book suggests is faking the sunset to signal to your body that it's time to wind down.
Okay, faking the sunset. How do we do that?
It's really about dimming the lights in the evening, creating a gradual transition from daylight to darkness. It's a way to mimic those natural rhythms of the day and help our bodies produce melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep.
It's like you're tricking your body into thinking it's actually sunset.
Exactly. And it can be really effective, especially for people who are exposed to a lot of artificial light throughout the day.
So it's like we're hacking our biology
In a way, yes.
to get better sleep. Okay, this is great stuff. We've covered a lot of ground here, from creating a distraction-free phone to faking the sunset. It seems like this whole Energize principle is really about taking a holistic approach to well-being.
It is. It's about recognizing that our physical, mental, and emotional energy are all interconnected.
Yeah, you can't separate them, can you?
You can't. And when we take care of ourselves in all of those areas, we're better able to show up as our best selves, both in our personal lives and in our professional lives.
And I think that's especially true for school leaders. You're not just leading a school, you're leading a community. And your energy, your well-being, it all ripples out to the people around you.
Absolutely. When school leaders prioritize their own well-being, it creates a ripple effect that impacts the entire school community.
So it's not just about us, it's about everyone we serve.
That's right. And when you take care of yourself, you're creating a more positive and supportive environment for everyone.
That's powerful stuff. Okay, so we've explored these 3 principles of make time: choosing a highlight, using laser focus, and energizing ourselves. We've talked about how these ideas can be applied to the unique world of school leadership. But I'm curious, how do these principles align with the core principles of school leadership in general?
That's a great question, and I think there's actually a lot of overlap.
Yeah, definitely
Because,
take that.
effective school leaders, they're visionary, they're focused, they're able to inspire and motivate others, and they're committed to continuous improvement. And those are all qualities that are directly supported by the Megtime framework.
Oh, that's interesting. So could you give us some specific examples of how that alignment plays out in practice?
Sure, let's start with vision. A key principle of school leadership is having that clear vision for the future of the school. And I think the Make Time framework, it can help leaders carve out the time and mental space to actually think about that vision, to work on strategic planning, and then to communicate that vision effectively to the school community.
So instead of getting bogged down in the day-to-day, leaders are empowered to focus on the big picture.
Exactly. And then there's focus. Effective school leaders are able to focus on what's important, to prioritize their efforts, to delegate effectively. And the Make Time framework, it gives us specific strategies for doing just that, from choosing a daily highlight to creating a distraction-free environment.
It's about being intentional with your time and energy
It is.
and not letting the urgent crowd out the important.
Right. And then there's inspiration. Great school leaders, they're able to inspire their staff, their students, their community. And the Make Time framework emphasizes the importance of taking care of your own well-being, which is essential if you want to show up as your best self and inspire others.
It's about leading by example, showing your team that it's possible to be both productive and well-balanced.
Exactly. And finally, there's continuous improvement. Effective school leaders are committed to ongoing learning and growth. And the Make Time framework, it encourages this spirit of experimentation, trying different tactics, tracking your results, and constantly seeking ways to improve.
So it's about creating a culture of learning, not just for students, but for the entire school community.
That's right. So you can see there's a really strong alignment between the principles of Make Time and the core principles of effective school leadership.
It's like they go hand in hand.
They do. And by embracing this framework, I think school leaders can really enhance their leadership skills, maximize the potential of their teams, and ultimately drive meaningful improvements in student achievement.
It's about creating a positive ripple effect that impacts everyone.
It is.
And it all starts with making that commitment to make time for what matters most.
That's where it all begins. Beautifully said. And that's a great place to kind of pause and think about, we've talked about aligning our actions with our vision, staying focused amidst, all the chaos and the whirlwind and, keeping our energy levels high. But before we kind of wrap up completely, I think it's important to consider, the practical side of all this. Like school leaders, let's be real, they're busy, really, really busy. So how can they actually take these ideas, these principles, and start putting them into practice in their, daily lives?
It's a great question, and I think that's where the final principle in Make Time comes in. That's the reflect principle. And the authors, they suggest a really simple practice. They say, reflect every evening for just 3 days. That's it. Just a few minutes to kind of look back on your day and notice what worked, what didn't work, and maybe think about what you might want to adjust for the next day.
And it's so easy to hear some of our listeners out there thinking, seriously, like one more thing to add to my to-do list. But reflection is different, isn't it? It's not about adding more work. It's about becoming more aware of how we're already working, how we're already spending our time.
I think you're absolutely right. It's about taking a pause, taking a step back to gain some perspective. And I love how the authors talk about this.
Yeah.
They paint this picture of you, the listener, wrapping up a busy school day. You're settling in for the evening. Maybe you're having a cup of tea or you're taking the dog for a walk. And you just spend just a few minutes thinking about your day. When did you get pulled into those infinity pools? When did you feel most energized, most focused? And what choices can you make tomorrow to create more of those moments?
I love that imagery. It's not about beating ourselves up for not getting everything done. It's about noticing patterns, celebrating those small wins, and just making those small, tiny adjustments that can actually lead to big changes over time.
Yeah, it's those small, consistent changes that can make a world of difference.
I think so, and I think that's where the magic happens, It's about progress, not perfection.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Make Time for school leaders, I have to say, I'm really glad we had this conversation. I was a little skeptical at first, I'll be honest. It's easy to think, productivity advice, that's too simplistic. It's not applicable to the complexities of education. But what I appreciate about this book is that it's not about a rigid set of rules. It's really about a mindset shift. It's about taking ownership of our time and our energy.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most powerful takeaways is that we have more control over our time and our attention than we often realize. We can choose how we respond to the demands of the world around us.
We have agency, right?
We do. And those choices, they have a ripple effect. They impact not just ourselves, but the people around us.
So true. And I think that's especially important in the context of school leadership.
Absolutely. When school leaders prioritize their well-being, when they create space for focus and intentionality, it creates this ripple effect that impacts the entire school community.
The teachers feel supported. The students thrive in a more positive and energized learning environment. It's a win-win for everyone.
And it all starts with that individual choice, that commitment to make time for what matters most.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Make Time. We hope you found it insightful, we hope you found it inspiring, and we hope you'll join us again next time for another deep dive into the world of education and leadership.
Yeah, it really is. And it all starts with making that commitment to make time for what matters most.
That's where it all begins. That's where the journey starts. And for all of our listeners out there, all those school leaders who are tuning in today, I would really encourage you to pick up a copy of Make Time, to really dive into these ideas.
Yeah, give it a shot. Experiment with those tactics that we talked about. Reflect on your own experiences. See what works for you. And remember, this is a journey, not a destination. There will be days, there will be weeks when you feel overwhelmed, when you feel distracted, when you feel completely depleted.
Yeah,
That's a reality of the work that we do. But I think what this book reminds us is that we have the power to make choices, to create a different experience for ourselves and for the people that we lead.
yeah, it's about taking ownership.
It is.
Yeah.
And by consistently making those small adjustments, those little tweaks to our routines, our habits, our mindsets, by choosing to prioritize our time, our energy, and our well-being, I really believe that we can create a profound impact, not just on our own lives, but on the lives of all those that we lead.
It's a ripple effect, right?
It is. It starts with us, but it extends outward to our families, to our colleagues, to our students, to our communities.
Well, this has been such a great conversation.
It has.
I've learned so much from you
I
today,
have enjoyed it immensely.
and I hope our listeners have too. So to everyone out there, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Make Time for School Leaders. We hope you found it insightful, we hope you found it inspiring, and most importantly, we hope you'll take these ideas and start putting them into action.
Make time for what matters.
That's right, make time for what matters. Until next time, keep making time for yourselves, for your well-being, and for the amazing work that you do every day.
Keep leading, keep learning, and keep making a difference.
We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.